Welcome to Conversations with Educators, where we bring educators from across the country to talk about topics like college and career readiness, graduation tracking, teacher growth, assessment coordination, and more. Let's get started.
Hey, I think we're going to go ahead. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. And so I think we'll go ahead and start. And I know we'll probably have some more participants joining us, but welcome and thank you for attending and participating with our Conversations with Educators. Today, we're very blessed to have Dr. Diane Whitlock. She is a former principal, educator, and is author of teacher evaluations using a growth process. And so we're really excited to have her today. Diana, you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit? And
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Tunnell. It's an honor to be here. Yes, I've been a teacher, a principal, various roles in education, as so many of us have done. And then a little bit later in my career, got involved with the teacher evaluation feedback part of the system and kind of did some work with that, worked with multiple schools and specific teachers on and administrators giving feedback and making that feedback count. And then eventually pulled it together in a book format and did some research on the power of giving good feedback and what that does to help your teachers grow. So thank you for having
yeah, that research is fantastic. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and just share a little bit about our process today and what we're going to be doing. So you'll see this is our series of Conversations with Educators. And today's topic is Elevate Classroom Observations from Notepads to Real-Time Insights. And so Diana is going to be sharing that with us today. If you look at the agenda, well, if I can get this to advance, why is it stuck? Our agenda today, there we go. Well, our agenda is to have a conversation about the power of real-time feedback, some ideas about scripting tools, and how to, even timestamp that observation so that you can have those meaningful post-conference discussions, and then creating meaningful growth opportunities. So, okay, so Dr. Whitlock, share with us a little bit about that power of feedback and maybe some of the research and the benefits of that real-time work.
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the most important things that when we talk about feedback is we need to recognize what is feedback, what's good feedback, what can we use, what can we kind of work with. And I saw that you put the time stamping on there, Dr. Tunnell, as far as talking about the giving the feedback in real time and with the timestamp on there, because that's just that good documentation piece. But one of the things that we kind of have to realize, I know myself, as an administrator, is how much feedback has changed just since when I was teaching, and you might have got a sticky note that said good job, and that was okay. There was nothing wrong with that. But we're working with a different generation of people now that are used to instant feedback on demand. It's just they're used to that right now. They don't want to wait 2 weeks till we go back and write something up. They want it to be able to look at it immediately. And I think that's a good thing, that's kind of the expectation, that they want to know, good and bad, what they're doing, how they can get better. It's not always a negative to have feedback. And I think sometimes, again, that's a generational perception too, that we were happy. I was happy when I was teaching in the 90s to say, oh, my principal came in and said I'm doing a good job. Okay, I'll keep going. I'll keep doing what I'm doing. But today's generation really wants more, and they want that give and take. They want to know how they can do better. Yes, what am I doing well, but how can I do better? And maybe what do I need to tweak up a little bit? So it's changing the conversation for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that specific feedback is so powerful. And I'm thinking, well, just in Texas alone, almost 40% of the new hires this year are from alternative certification programs. So we knew this was coming with the pipeline for teachers.
Right.
It's just become so imperative that we give feedback because we have people joining the educational system without the methodology and the pedagogy and those things. So feedback is going to be very critical for, it's nice for all staff, but very critical if you're working with teachers who are coming in through an alternative certification or, new teachers even
Right,
through
right.
programs. So I think your point about the specificity of the feedback goes beyond, knowing you did a good job is one thing, but I always wanted to know, okay, but what specifically did, was beneficial, and then what could I grow in? So
Right.
that's
Yeah, and
great.
it really makes our job a lot easier too, because if I evaluate a teacher and I've documented that maybe they had a really good, trying to think of an example of something that might be evaluated. Maybe they had really good checks for understanding. That's built into most systems, most evaluation systems, and they're doing a superior job about that. And I record that in real time. Then next week, maybe I'm observing a teacher who's struggling in that area. And it kind of lends itself to that whole peer coaching kind of piece
Yes.
too, to say, maybe I could cover your class next week and you can go watch this teacher do this thing. And, kind of that peer mentoring, peer coaching piece too. We can always, as educators, as administrators, we're always looking for affordable professional development opportunities. And I think that's one of the easiest, cheapest in-house, ways to go, is to be able to pull up that data dashboard and say, okay, who are my strongest people in this area? And
Right.
kind of utilize what you have in that way.
Yeah, that's a great. So one nugget is definitely the be specific about the positive, and hopefully I know there different programs for new teachers as I remember back into the onboarding and mentoring new teachers and the professional development that we did for them. We focused on one area at a time because it's so overwhelming if you're trying to check for understanding and use formative assessment and do the DOK levels. And I mean there's so much, and I think just from the standpoint of, again, those coming from alternative certified programs, how focusing on just one area as an administrator, and saying, okay, we're going to start with this area and I'm going to give you real-time feedback here and then move on to another area too. So
Sure.
what are some other things that you found in the research and
Yeah.
practice of giving feedback?
Yeah, so we really kind of wanted to find out when we set out doing our research study with teachers that had been using a system of targeted feedback and feedback in real time. We started out, we wanted to see, is this making a difference? As educators, I think that's just kind of within us. We always want to know, whether we're teaching, whether we're coaching, whatever we're doing, are we making a difference? So is giving this scripted and targeted feedback making a difference? And we found that the schools that were using the systems for targeted feedback in real time, and use those consistently for 3 years, that their teachers were definitely showing positive growth. If you broke that down, you could see where they started and where they ended, and they were getting much, I don't want to say just higher marks, but they were improving in their practice as they went through after using these systems. So I think that, you know, when we think about these systems where we give feedback and help guide teachers, we know it's the right thing to do, but we were looking for some backup because, you know, we all need some of that to say, hey, look, whether you're talking to your stakeholders or your school boards or whoever, not only is this going to make my life easier as an admin, but it's going to help my teachers grow. And ultimately,
Mhm.
that's what we want to see happen. We also found, and that's what we hoped we would find, we also found that schools that used the real-time systems for feedback over a period of time didn't have as many, they didn't have as much teacher turnover, I guess is the easiest way to say
Oh,
it. They didn't have as many teachers in and out. And that was just kind of a little bonus, but I found it really interesting. I think it kind of shows that when we can give teachers constructive feedback and when we can, you know, value what they're doing. I think it's a really good way to say, I value what you're doing here and I want to help you get better at your craft. Then teachers weren't as transient. And that's huge right now because as Dr. Tunnell
yeah.
just shared, we're losing people quickly out of the profession. And we want those people, those good, hardworking people to stay and be satisfied with their job and what they're doing in our schools.
Yeah, yeah, and right now, I know across the United States, the efforts in retention and keeping teachers and, some districts are looking at, 4-day weeks and wellness days and all kinds of things um, to help retain the teachers that they have. But I think giving feedback, especially specificity within the feedback that's given, makes such a difference because we're all motivated to get better, and so I think that's an interesting uh, research data point that I think uh, like you said was a bonus, but it
It
does
was.
lend itself, and it makes sense that those that are engaged in a growth process and going in with a growth mindset and having that modeled from the administrators, that it's not a gotcha, and it's not a hammer, it's a growth tool to help you get better. So
Absolutely.
thank you for
Yes.
sharing that. Talk to us a little bit about the scripting process and why scripting is so important. What
Yeah, yes, yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. I think when, and I noticed, Dr. Tuttle, you're using the word specificity. It's hard to say, being
Yeah.
specific a lot. And that's key because that's going to be your guiding, that's going to be your conversation starter for when you have your conferences, your post conferences with your teachers. And I know some schools do pre-conferences and post conferences. Some have gone to maybe they kind of skip the pre-conference and do a pre-conference forum of some sort. And I think that's fine. Everybody's limited on time. But I really hope most of our admins are still having some time to kind of have a sit down with that teacher at some point, because that's when you get to take those facts and what the scripting might look like, and really talk through it and really kind of break it down into what, um, what was going on in the classroom? What did I see? What do you think? How do you think it went? Those good conversations. But
Mhm.
I really think when I think about scripting, I always kind of reminds me of when I was teaching kids about fact and opinion, because it's so important that we stick to the facts that we see. And then you can pull in the judgment piece later. But when you're scripting, I used to always, when I was training administrators, kind of talk about the court reporter. You really are just taking down what you see in the moment, and you're maybe documenting those interactions with kids, and you're, whatever, those are the kinds of things that, you know, you want to put in your recording and in your documentation, in your scripting piece. And then the judgment can come in later when okay, the teacher walked over and guided the student in whatever. And then you could say, oh, that was a really good check for understanding, and put the judgment piece with it later. And especially when you have that conversation with the teacher. I was observing at a classroom one time, and a kid got a little, not bad, but just a little wiggly, not really paying attention. And the teacher went over and said something, and I was like, I wonder what she said, because he really straightened right up. So, you don't always even have that information, but I was able to put that, she used proximity to de-escalate whatever was kind of brewing there with that guy. And then that gave us something to talk about too later in the conference about how she redirected and maybe, how that would work. So it's really is about being very specific and being very non-judgmental when you're doing the actual recording. And then again, a lot of the systems allow you to go back and tie that to your rubric and the different examples. So
Sure. Yeah, that's definitely a benefit when you can
Mhm.
script in the software itself and then tag it directly to which component or domain or
Right.
category that it
Organized.
fits in. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really good point. And I like what you said about the judgment. I think in your book you call it evidence versus judgment. So it's
Yes.
that the
Yes.
court reporter piece is
Yes.
really good because I remember doing observations myself, and you're trying to stay out of the judgment world of
Right.
saying, this is what is happening, but just taking down that information to have in the post-conference conversation. Then it's like, explain to me a little bit more, or how do you think that worked? And so it
Yes.
really lends itself to the reflection, the teacher reflection, and being able to see what their thoughts are on that. Um, so how do you see those growth opportunities in that conversation um transpiring, like in the post conference or giving the feedback? What did you find was the most beneficial there?
Yeah. So I think that it's just so important for both sides to remember, as you said, that it's not a gotcha, that it is one of my favorite quotes, and I wish I could take credit for it, but it came from a colleague that said, if a teacher evaluation is a process done with the teacher, not to the teacher. And
Oh,
I think that's huge right there, because
yep.
yes, I've got all this documentation, but now let's use this to talk about how we could maybe get better. And yeah, I've had teachers really kind of say, wow, I didn't realize I was doing this or that, and that just it's kind of an aha moment for them as well to say, well, I didn't know I maybe I could have used a different example here, or, the more they can be involved in kind of discovering those conversations. And even when you have to have what we call the hard conversations sometimes, when things really aren't going well, um, I still think that having that scripting there is huge, because
Mhm.
that's and again, not a gotcha, but that is your documentation that again, maybe they're doing something they didn't even realize.
Right.
And I've used the example before. I put one time at a teacher that she made a negative comment to a student, but I didn't put what it was. And she said, well, I don't remember making because I mean, that's very general.
Right.
And because I didn't get it all down, she didn't really. And I said, well, I took it out because she wasn't comfortable with that in there, but it led to a conversation about the things we say to kids and how they might be perceived. And so
Hmm.
it's good, very good fodder to kind of just have, again, just those conversations when people uh, maybe need a little guidance for improvement, or maybe they're doing something really well and you want to
Right.
make sure that you capture that too.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's great insight. Um, well, we're going to open it up for Q&A. So if you've got some questions that you have for Dr. Whitlock, go ahead and you drop those in, and we'll get those answered before we sign off. While they're thinking or typing, um, share with us the the process of, because you mentioned, you didn't put in that negative the exact verbiage of that negative comment. So what recommendations do you have to have that specificity in there?
Yeah, direct quotes are good, but I've gotten overwhelmed before trying to get everything down. And I've had administrators say, how do I keep up and write it? No, you don't need to write every single thing. You're not really a court reporter. But I think that if there's something that maybe you've seen in the past that you know might be a challenge for that teacher, or again, maybe something that teacher does really, really well, or something that maybe you noticed on a previous visit. I've had principals tell me that, this person really struggled in this area, so I'm going to go back and do a short visit and just look for examples of that. So again, it's kind of about looking at your data and knowing your staff, obviously, knowing your people and who you're working with, and maybe kind of just that sense of, you know, helping to guide them in the areas that where they're striving to get better. Or some schools I know that do use pre-conferences or pre-conference forms. The teacher tells them kind of what they're going to be doing and what we're going to be looking for. So, those might be things you can kind of zero in on too.
Yeah. Great points. I think that's such a benefit from, again, going back to that growth mindset. And you mentioned even walkthroughs, specific feedback in walkthroughs is beneficial. Hopefully everyone has a tool that they can use for that scripting. I mean, I used to try and write it down, and then, I'd take in my iPad, transition to that, and would type it in. But then you had it all outside that you had to go back into the evaluation system and try to put that in place. And I guess that's one of the things I feel like our tool does very well, is have the ability to be in the observation or in the walkthrough, have the rubric up right next to you, or you can just script without the rubric. And having it in the system makes it so much easier to go back and tag it to the specific components and domains, and make sure that you're covering what you have. So we want to thank you for your time, and Dr. Whitlock, thank you for sharing with us and having the conversation. We hope that you all have a tremendous day, and we look forward to helping make things easier. That's our goal in our at Education Advanced. And so we're happy to have you here, and hope that you have a very successful week. So we'll sign off for now, and thank you again for participating.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. If you want to learn more about college and career readiness, graduation tracking, teacher growth, assessment coordination, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter. Until next time.